Are you like the rest of the internet and love to hear about things that went really bad for some place or someone? If you said yes, I have some good news for you. This video is filled with that kind of stuff. What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to The World According to Briggs. Let's talk about towns in the United States that have been destroyed. You might be surprised how many have been destroyed over the years. Some have caught fire, many have flooded, while others have simply blown up. Really, we've had cities blown up. Today's list is about towns that have been destroyed. Some have been rebuilt, while some others haven't. Every state has them. It's not always Mother Nature or some kind of man-made disaster. Some have been destroyed for a reason, like we intentionally did that. So this list is really interesting, but I will tell you up front, there isn't a lot of footage on some of these places because they've been gone for a while. We'll do what we can, and that may include video from the land from that area, just kind of give you some kind of visual thing to look at instead of just me flapping my gums. All right, let's take a look. Number 10, Galveston, Texas. All right, let's start off with one that has been rebuilt, and today it's a great city. Galveston was briefly the capital city of the Republic of Texas and later one of the largest ports in the United States. That's the good news. The bad news is they get hurricanes. On September 8th, 1900, they got a really bad one. A Category 4 hurricane slammed the city, killing thousands of residents. Most say the large number of deaths was a result of poor weather reporting and townspeople dismissing the evacuation order and science and warnings and all that other good stuff. Sort of like masks today. The storm's 15-foot surge washed out the entire island that sits about 8 feet above sea level, destroying nearly 4,000 homes, all the bridges to the mainland, telegraph lines, most of the ships in the wharf, and even rail lines as far as 6 miles inland were damaged or destroyed. Besides dealing with all the damage and the collecting of your dearly departed off the beaches, the island had zero communication with mainland Texas. It took a full 2 days to send news to President McKinley, who was the president at the time, obviously, that the city was in ruins. Messengers reported at the time 500 dead and total loss of property, but the devastation was greater than initially suspected. In today's dollars, damage from the 1900 Galveston hurricane would be around $100 billion, and it lost between 6,000 and 12,000 people. Yeah, 6,000 and 12,000 people died in that hurricane. The second costliest and most deadly natural disaster in U.S. history. Number 9, Texas City, Texas. On the morning of April 16, 1947, Texas City was the site of the deadliest industrial accident in United States history and largest non-nuclear explosion. Bravo, Texas City. You really know how to go big. On that morning, the French-registered vessel SS Grand Camp was docked in the port with her cargo of about 2,300 tons of ammonium nitrate. Around 8 a.m., smoke was spotted in the cargo hold of the Grand Camp. Over the next hour, attempts to extinguish the fire or bring it under control failed. Ammonium nitrate reached an explosive threshold from the combination of heat and pressure. The vessel detonated, causing great destruction and damage throughout the port and just set things on fire. The tremendous blast produced a 15-foot wave that was detectable nearly 100 miles from the Texas shoreline. The blast leveled nearly 1,000 buildings on land. The Grand Camp exploded, ignited the refineries and chemical tanks on the waterfront, so the whole place was ablaze. Falling bales of burning twine that were in the ship's cargo added to the damage by setting neighborhoods and stuff on fire. It was basically mortars thrown into the air that were on fire. Twine, come on, that's crazy. 2 sightseeing airplanes nearby were blown out of the sky, killing all on board, while 10 miles away, half of the windows in Galveston were shattered. The explosion blew most of the ship's steel into the air, like parts of the ship went flying into the air, and some at supersonic speed. They were breaking the sound barrier. Wonder how fun that would be to hear. 567 people died, including all but one member of the 28-man Texas City Volunteer Fire Department from the initial explosion on the dock while fighting the shipboard fire. With the fires raging throughout Texas City, first responders from other areas initially were unable to reach the site of the disaster because of all the craziness going on. The first explosion ignited ammonium nitrate in a nearby cargo ship called the High Flyer. After smoke had been pouring out of the hold for about 5 hours and they were unable to cut her loose and get her out to sea, the High Flyer exploded, demolishing the nearby SS Wilson B. Keene, killing at least 2 more people, and increasing the damage to the port and other ships from more shrapnel and burning objects flying through the sky. One of the propellers from the High Flyer was blown off and subsequently was found nearly a mile inland. Have you ever seen a big ship's propeller? That's like the size of a Volkswagen Bug. That propeller is now part of a memorial park and is located near the anchor of the Grand Camp, which they kept that too. Over 5,000 people were injured, with some admitted to the 21 area hospitals. Almost 600 homes were leveled and hundreds damaged, leaving 2,000 people homeless. The seaport was destroyed and many businesses were just flattened or burned to the ground. The property damage was estimated to be $100 million at the time. That's about $1.1 billion in today's dollars. Number 8, BayOcean, Oregon. BayOcean was a community in Tillamook County, Oregon, right on the Pacific Ocean, sometimes known as the town that fell into the sea. They wanted it to be the Atlantic City of the Pacific, but it ended up with that nickname. It was a planned resort community founded in 1906 on the Tillamook Spit, a small stretch of land that forms the wall of Tillamook Bay. This was a resort and real estate venture. The location of BayOcean was said to have been discovered by founder Thomas Irving Potter while sightseeing and hunting along the Oregon coast. He built the resort and sectioned off plots of land and sold them. As time went on, they had a gas station, grocery store, and a yacht that brought people from Portland to BayOcean. Then eventually they got a train. Actually, sadly, right around the same time, they invested all this money into a yacht, and the train got there not too long after. The downside of the yacht is it had to enter Tillamook Bay. At the time, it was one of the most treacherous crossings in the Pacific Ocean. The locals from Tillamook and BayOcean looked into a jetty to make it a smoother entrance. The Army Corps of Engineers said that they needed a 2-jetty system that would create a channel into the bay, make it, great for everyone. What happened next? They decided that it would cost too much to build 2 jetties, so they went with a single jetty. What happened next was tragic. The single jetty created erosion on the beach and eventually the cliffs of BayOcean. And the houses that were on the cliffs were moved back, but it just kept eroding and eroding. And then in 1932, waves from a massive storm finally crossed the beach and destroyed the huge auditorium that they had there. The spit itself was further damaged by winter storms in 1939, 1942, 1948, and by 1952, what was left of BayOcean had become an island. BayOcean Post Office closed in 1953. What little remained of the town was demolished during a reclamation and dike building project in 1956. In 1960, BayOcean's last house was washed away, and in 1972, the last remaining building, a garage, finally fell into the ocean. Number 7, St. Thomas, Nevada. And now we get to the one that inspired this list. I read about it a couple years back that it reappeared, and I thought it was really interesting. Kind of got the ball rolling on this list. St. Thomas is a ghost town in Clark County, Nevada, near where the Muddy River flows into the Colorado River. The town was founded by Mormon settlers led by Thomas Smith in 1865, with a population of about 500 people at its peak. The Mormons abandoned St. Thomas in February of 1871 as the land was surveyed and shifted the state line of Nevada 1 degree in longitude to the east, placing all the Mormon settlements known as the Muddy Mission in Nevada instead of Arizona or Utah. The state of Nevada attempted to collect taxes for the previous years, payable only in gold from the residents. They chose to leave without paying in 1871. St. Thomas was purchased by the federal government and abandoned as the waters of Lake Mead submerged the town in the 1930s. However, as the levels of Lake Mead dropped in the 2000s, the ruins of the town resurfaced. That's what I was reading about, how this town that hadn't been seen in, decades and decades, all of a sudden popped back up. It's now the Lake Mead recreational area. And you could still see some of the ruins right now if you go there. Number 6, Neversink, New York. Neversink was founded in 1798 and had a population of about 2,000 residents when it was destroyed. It was relocated, but the original one is not too far from Liberty, New York, and is currently sitting about 30 feet underwater, give or take. Neversink, which has a perfectly ironic name for what happened, had all the things that a great town needs: a school, a church, and a main street. In the 1940s, New York City was getting thirsty. So to give the Big Apple more drinking water, the towns of Bittersweet and Neversink had to be evacuated to build the Neversink Reservoir. The city's not alone. Communities being destroyed by reservoirs are so common, there's a genre of fiction called Reservoir Noir that deals with intentionally flooded towns across America. We just talked about St. Thomas, pretty much the same thing. They built the Hoover Dam and St. Thomas had to go. Number 5, Flagstaff, Maine. Flagstaff is another flooded ghost town and former town in Somerset County, Maine, about 20 miles north of Rangeley, Maine. There isn't much about this town that I could find other than how it got its name is pretty cool. Benedict Arnold camped here on his Quebec expedition and erected a flagstaff. hence the name. That's how they named it. Someone put up a flagstaff. Well, Benedict Arnold. That guy's pretty interesting. I mean, besides being a traitor and hated here in the United States, he eventually moved on to Canada and became a very hated man there too. That guy he was just an a-hole from the get-go, and I guess everywhere he went, everyone just wanted to burn his house down. I read he eventually had to go to England because he was hated in America and in Canada. Anyway, the town was abandoned and dismantled in 1950 to allow construction of a hydroelectric dam on the Dead River, which enlarged Flagstaff Lake and submerged the site of the town. And now it's like under 30 feet of water. There's actually a song by a Maine musician named Slade Cleavis. It's called Below. It was on his 2004 album called Wishbone. He refers to the destruction of the town, although he doesn't mention it by name. The lyrics specifically mention the Dead River and its general location. So yeah, I thought that one was pretty interesting, especially the Benedict Arnold part. Number 4, Champoeg, Oregon. Champoeg is now a very wet ghost town. It was an important settlement in the Willamette Valley in the early 1840s. It's located right between Oregon City and Salem, and it was the site of the first provisional government of the Oregon Country. Yeah, before we were a state, we were the Oregon Country. Around 1852, the town had grown to include a ferry crossing, a warehouse, a steamboat landing, a granary, owned by the Hudson Bay Company, a stagecoach office, and a couple other things. It had 10 north-south streets and 6 east-west streets. It was a legit town. I mean, it wasn't just a bunch of houses together and, frontiers people. It was a legit town. The town continued to exist after Oregon statehood. Then, on December 2nd, 1861, the Willamette River rose 55 feet above its normal summer stage, putting the town under 7 feet of water. In true Oregon fashion, every building was destroyed except the 2 saloons. Champoeg was never rebuilt after the disaster. The town site is now preserved as Champoeg State Heritage Area. A 1901 monument records the names of the 52 settlers who voted to establish the provisional government at the 1843 meeting. They now have dams all up along the Willamette River, so it'll probably never happen again, so it's a safe place to live. It's not too far from where I am currently, but I thought that was an interesting story. And Champoeg is spelled with a CH. Who saw that one coming? Number 3, Napoleon, Arkansas. Napoleon was a river port town in Arkansas from 1820 to 1874. It was situated at the confluence of the Arkansas and Mississippi rivers. Building a town on the Mississippi River has proven to be a bad idea quite often. An old documentary about the Mississippi River I saw years ago, an old Cajun man that had lived on the banks of the river his entire life. I forgot the name of the documentary, but I remember something he had said in that thick Cajun accent. I won't even attempt to sound like him. But he said, the Mississippi River does what it wants. Before cement, you were a fool to build permanent on its edge, which totally makes sense. Napoleon's fate was sealed in 1863 when a channel was cut through the soft land that directed the river towards the town. They tried to direct it away from the town, but the river had its sights set on Napoleon and it came to visit eventually. Napoleon was finally deserted in 1874 when the banks of the Mississippi River overflowed and destroyed much of what remained of the once thriving river port. Now, what's interesting is Mark Twain talked about it in the book Life on the Mississippi. He tells a story of learning from a deathbed confession that $10,000 was hidden behind a brick in a building in Napoleon. When Twain tried to retrieve it, he discovered the entire town had been washed away, along with the $10,000. Number 2. Paradise, California. The Camp Fire was the deadliest and most destructive wildfire in California history, and the most expensive natural disaster in the world in 2018 in terms of insured losses, as well as the single most destructive wildfire recorded in modern times, and it destroyed the entire town of Paradise, California. Paradise, California sits in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountain range and has seen its share of wildfires over the years, like so many towns in the hills and mountains of California. Get them every year. But none had really ever reached the town, maybe to the edge, but not engulfed the town or really even burned a house or two. That was about it in Paradise. The Camp Fire could have been just another wildfire if it didn't happen during a windstorm. In the aftermath of the Camp Fire, 86 were dead and almost 14,000 homes were destroyed and Paradise was decimated. In the 2010 census, Paradise had 26,000 residents. When this year's census is completed, they predict it will be about 4,000. Those 4,000 are the ones that are brave enough to come back and rebuild, which they're doing right now. Still, 2 years later, there's construction going on right now. The cause of the fire was PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric. They were found guilty of this and eventually claimed bankruptcy. As one of the news reporters put it, if they were a person, they would be in jail right now. And number 1, Vanport, Oregon. And we finish off the list with my favorite, Vanport, Oregon, probably because it's kind of close to my home. Built in 110 days in 1942, Vanport was always meant to be a temporary housing project and a superficial solution to Portland's wartime housing shortage. At its height, Vanport housed 40,000 residents, making it the second largest city in Oregon at the time. And it was home to basically wartime shipyard workers. Vanport's construction began in 1942 at the wartime Kaiser shipyards in Portland and in Vancouver, Washington. Vanport was a combination of Vancouver and Portland. After the war, Vanport lost more than half its population, dropping to about 18,000 people, as many wartime workers left the area. However, there was a sudden influx of returning World War II veterans. They needed a place to live, and a lot of them were coming home to Oregon. The community began to grow, and things were good. I mean, as good as town can be that was set up in 110 days by the government. That was until Memorial Day 1948. 1948 had been a very wet year, even by Oregon standards. A snowy winter had left the mountain snowpack thick. Then May rolls around, and it was a little warmer than usual, and the Columbia River began to swell. On May 30th, Memorial Day, the residents woke to find a flyer that told everyone that the dikes had been inspected and they were just fine. This was a worry at the time. Columbia River had gotten pretty big, bigger than it had been in years. By 4:30 that day, they realized the dikes weren't fine. What started as a 6-foot hole in the dike grew to a 500-foot section that had collapsed. Within 10 minutes of the collapse, the town was underwater and homes had been swept away. And in true American fashion, the conspiracy started right afterwards, mostly around the amount of dead. It was reported that 175 people had perished. People at the ice plant where the bodies were stored claimed it was more like 550 to 600. And one story I read claimed that it was over 1,000, that the government was hiding that from people. They never rebuilt Vanport. The only thing that's left of Vanport is a plaque from the community college they had there. It's at Portland State University right now. All right, that's today's list. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this one. I hope you guys did too. It was really interesting. What was your favorite? I'd love to hear in the comment section below. Let me know. Does everyone else love Vanport like I did? All right, don't forget all the links below. Give the video a big thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Everybody have a great day. Be nice to each other.